You know, it's funny. If you just look around modern society right now, you see this glaring, honestly, almost laughable paradox.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, imagine you're standing right in the middle of Times Square. There are these massive, flashing, high-definition billboards everywhere you look.
Right.
And practically every one of them is selling you some version of fire. It's loud. It's entirely in your face.
Yeah, you literally can't escape it.
You really can't. But then, if you look closely at the actual people walking by on the street, everyone has their head down.
Mm-hmm.
They've got their noise-canceling headphones on. They're totally isolated. I mean, we are swimming in this absolute sea of hypersexualized messaging, yet somehow we've never been more disconnected from what intimacy actually means.
It really is the defining contradiction of our time. I mean, we are completely heavily saturated with the imagery of desire, yet we're just profoundly starved of the actual experience of it.
Exactly. And, well, that brings us to our mission for you today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
We are thrilled you're here with us.
We really are. You're sitting as the third person in this conversation today because we are looking at a stack of research centered around a text that just completely shatters how we look at that exact paradox.
It really does. It's an incredibly provocative piece called The Problem with Sex, What They Don't Want You to Know.
Yeah. Now, before we really get into the weeds here, we have to acknowledge something right off the bat.
Right, the disclaimer.
Yeah, the disclaimer. Because this material deals heavily with, systemic power dynamics and critiques of patriarchal history and some pretty pointed anti-capitalist themes. So we want to be crystal clear. Our mission today isn't to endorse these viewpoints.
No, not at all.
Or take sides politically. We are simply here to impartially report on these fascinating, deeply provocative arguments the author is making and just figure out what exactly they are trying to say.
And that's vital context because, I mean, the central premise of this text is undeniably bold. It argues that this collective alienation, you and I and everyone else, feels the fact that civilization is obsessed with sex, but totally alienated from it. It's not some tragic historical accident.
Right.
The author claims it is a managed condition.
It's not a bug in the system, it's a feature.
Exactly.
The claim here is that this confusion is a deliberately manufactured product. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to even begin to wrap our heads around an idea that massive, the author completely flips the script on the history of human sexuality.
They really take you all the way back.
They do. Because before we can figure out why our relationship with sex is so, glitchy and broken right now, we have to look back at how it used to be viewed and how it was deliberately downgraded.
What's fascinating here is how the text details these ancient cosmologies to make that exact point. We're talking about a time when sex was not viewed as a private, closed-door, slightly embarrassing act at all.
Right, it wasn't something to hide.
Not at all. It was understood as a cosmic event. According to these early frameworks, the union of masculine and feminine principles wasn't just about human reproduction. It was viewed as the literal engine of creation itself.
I mean, it was the force that made the sun rise. But wait, time out for a second. I have to play devil's advocate here.
Sure, go for it.
Isn't there a huge danger in this argument of just, romanticizing the past? Were these ancient temples actually empowering for the people living in those societies? Or was it just a different flavor of hierarchy that we're putting through a rosy Instagram filter today?
That is a very fair critique. And to be precise, the text isn't arguing that ancient Mesopotamia or early agrarian societies were flawless feminist utopias.
Okay.
It's focusing specifically on the theological framework of those eras. The text points to concepts like Eros and Shakti. In these ancient traditions, Eros wasn't just a synonym for a late-night physical urge.
Right.
It was viewed as the organizing magnetic force of the universe. And Shakti wasn't just a physical woman, she was the dynamic, animating principle of all existence. Wow.
Yeah. The text highlights a practice known as Hyos Gamos, the sacred marriage. This was a ritual performed in temples, and its stated purpose was the renewal of the world itself. It was bridging the earthly and the divine, not merely personal pleasure.
I see. So it's about the paradigm, not necessarily a perfect society.
Exactly.
If I'm translating this into modern terms, it's kind of like humanity used to run on this profound universe-level operating system.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Like a flawless open source code that connected us directly to the cosmos. But then somewhere along the line, that massive OS was deliberately downgraded into this buggy, glitchy little app that just keeps crashing our phones.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Honestly, humanity is in desperate need of an IT restart right now.
We really are.
Yeah.
Because the author argues that patriarchal religious and political frameworks came in and essentially performed a hostile takeover of that operating system.
Yeah.
They dismantled the goddess temples. They expelled the initiates who, by the way, the text makes a very specific point to note, were not what we'd call prostitutes today, right? They were highly trained spiritual practitioners.
Exactly. And by doing this, they deliberately relocated sexuality. They forcefully took it out of the sacred column and just shoved it into the shameful column.
Which is a devastating relocation when you think about the psychological toll.
It truly is. And I'd love for you listening right now to just pause whatever you're doing and consider that for a second. Think about your own internal monologue.
Yeah, really think about it.
How fundamentally different would your own life be? How entirely different would your self-image be if society had always taught you from day one that your body was a literal temple to be honored?
Instead of a constant, unpredictable problem that you need to manage or fix or hide.
Right. It shifts absolutely everything.
It does. But, that brings up a really crucial mechanical point. If this cosmic operating system was so powerful and the goal of these emerging institutions was to downgrade it,
Yeah.
how do you even enforce that on a mass scale?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because you can't put a guard in everyone's bedroom. The text says the answer was turning the body into its own jailer. So according to this argument, sexual shame isn't just some accidental cultural byproduct.
No, not at all.
It's an actual installed feature of modern civilization.
That is precisely the argument. The author is very methodical on this point. If you want to control a population, you eventually have to control the physical body.
Because the body does its own thing.
Exactly. The body is inherently unruly. It hungers, it desires, it seeks pleasure, and avoids pain without asking any king or politician for permission.
Right.
The text points out that a body that trusts its own signals is a sovereign entity. And sovereignty, when you multiply it by millions of people, is completely ungovernable.
You literally can't control people who are entirely comfortable in their own skin.
No, you can't.
They won't buy your cures, and they won't obey your arbitrary rules.
You really cannot. So the elegant, brutal solution that emerged across centuries was to teach the body to fundamentally distrust itself. You teach people that their natural desire is inherently sinful, that pleasure equals guilt. And you asked how they did this without a guard in every room. Well, the text documents how these mechanisms were woven into the very fabric of society, specifically through four main pillars. First, you have religion, which spent centuries positioning the flesh as corrupt and inherently fallen.
Right, setting the baseline that your natural state is just wrong.
Exactly.
But the text doesn't just stop in ancient history. It gets into the medical field, too, which I found mind-blowing. How exactly did medicine enforce this?
Oh, this part is wild. Medicine stepped in to pathologize natural responses. The text points to the Victorian era specifically, where autonomous female desire was literally labeled as a disease.
Right, hysteria.
Yes, hysteria.
They literally invented a medical diagnosis to explain away female pleasure and autonomy. Like, if a woman had her own desires, she wasn't sovereign, she was sick, and needed a doctor to cure her.
Exactly. It moved the control from the priest to the physician. Then you have the law. For centuries, legal doctrines like coverture in English common law dictated that a woman's legal rights and obligations were entirely subsumed by those of her husband upon marriage.
So she just didn't exist legally.
Right. The law literally rendered women's bodies as the property of men. It wasn't just a cultural norm, it was legislated reality.
Man. And then the final nail in the coffin, the education system.
Oh, yeah.
The author talks about how educational institutions intentionally withheld accurate, affirming anatomical information from generations of adults. I mean, we are talking about biology textbooks that deliberately left out the clitoris.
It's just erased.
Completely. Or they reduce human reproduction to these cold mechanical plumbing diagrams that completely erase pleasure.
Which raises an important question, and it's one the author really wants the reader to sit with. How does a population function when its basic biological signals like arousal, longing, or even just wanting to be touched are reflexively paired with subconscious guilt?
Well, according to the source material, it doesn't function well for the individual.
No, it doesn't.
But it does function exactly how the authorities want it to. The shame operates way below consciousness.
Yeah.
The prisoner is locking their own cell door every single night.
Very well put.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because while this massive control mechanism damaged Absolutely everyone, men, women, everyone in between the text, explicitly points out that it was historically weaponized against one group in particular, which is women.
Yes.
The text focuses heavily on this concept of feminine erotic sovereignty.
This is an absolute cornerstone of the text's thesis. Feminine erotic sovereignty is defined here as the full, self-directed sexuality of a woman who genuinely knows her own desire and moves from it.
Right.
It's sexuality that exists for its own sake, not performing for a male gaze, not seeking societal approval, and definitely not tied to reproduction.
You know, I was trying to picture this while reading, and it's kind of like, imagine a power grid, right? But not a standard city grid. Think of uncolonized feminine arrows like an independent, self-sustaining, renewable energy source. The text says this energy generates, it discerns, it receives, and it transforms.
I love that.
Crucially, the author notes that it doesn't try to conquer or subordinate anyone else. Because it's completely self-contained and self-generating, an authoritarian state can't easily tap into it or meter it or control it.
Right, it's outside their system.
Exactly. So what does a control-based civilization do when it finds a massive power grid? It can't dominate. It shuts it down.
And the text meticulously details the layered thoroughness of that shutdown. It wasn't just one strategy, it was a comprehensive siege.
Yeah.
We already talked about the law, but it was also driven by economic dependency. By restricting women from owning property or having bank accounts for centuries, institutions ensured women couldn't simply walk away.
Because they needed survival.
Right. They couldn't refuse access to those who controlled their literal physical survival.
You comply or you starve.
Precisely. Add to that the complete cultural erasure of those goddess traditions we mentioned earlier, which removed any divine reflection of the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps most insidiously, it was the cultural equation of female virtue with sexual restraint. The text notes strongly that this is an equation that has absolutely no equivalent for men.
None at all.
A man's moral character is rarely judged by his lack of sexual experience, but for women, purity became synonymous with worthiness.
It's a totally rigged game.
The author certainly frames it that way. But the text arrives at a very powerful conclusion here. It argues that because the suppression of this energy was so foundational to the way our modern civilization was built, a woman reclaiming her erotic sovereignty today isn't just like going on a personal healing retreat.
Right.
It is a deeply political act. The text literally calls it a cosmological restoration. Recovering that power is reclaiming something that was stolen from the collective human experience.
Okay, so let's look at the landscape we've mapped out so far. We've got the sacred cosmic operating system stripped away. We've got natural sovereignty suppressed by installed systemic shame.
Yep.
So what fills that massive void? I mean, human beings still have the drive, right? So what takes the place of the sacred?
Well, text argues it's commerce.
Commerce. But again, I want to play devil's advocate here. Because if you look around today, like we said at the start with the Times Square analogy, sex is absolutely everywhere.
Oh, it's ubiquitous.
It's on billboards, it's the plot of every movie, it's on our phones 24/7. Aren't we supposed to be living in the most sexually liberated era in the history of the world?
It certainly looks like liberation on the surface, but the text argues we are severely misinterpreting the landscape. What we have isn't liberation, it is merely a transaction.
A transaction.
Think about it. When you remove the sacred dimension of sex, which, by the way, the text notes isn't just some vague romantic idea.
Right. The author grounds this in actual global history.
Exactly. This sacred dimension was an explicit, practiced path to divine union found in tantric philosophy, in the ecstatic poetry of Sufi mystics like Rumi, and in deep Western mysticism.
Yeah.
These traditions didn't view the body as an obstacle to God, they viewed it as the portal.
The portal.
But when you systematically remove that profound portal, what's left? Sex is reduced entirely to a product. It becomes a performance, a physical release valve, or just a power play.
It's just a metric of how desirable you are compared to the person next to you.
Precisely. But here's the tragedy the author points out. The human nervous system hasn't forgotten what it's actually designed for.
Right.
The text posits that beneath all the societal conditioning, the body isn't just mechanically seeking an orgasm, it is seeking reunion.
Reunion.
Yes, it is seeking the dissolution of separation. It wants genuine soul-level contact with another living being where the ego temporarily drops away.
But there's the rub, right?
Yeah.
You can't put a barcode on soul-level contact. You can't package the dissolution of the ego and sell it for a monthly subscription fee.
Exactly. Because true, uncolonized connection cannot be regulated, commodified, and sold back to you at a markup. It is simply left out of the modern cultural conversation entirely.
Completely ignored.
What we are left with is what the author brilliantly terms a hunger with no real food. You can stimulate that hunger endlessly with advertising and media, but you can never actually satisfy it with what consumer culture is currently offering.
A hunger with no real food. That is such a haunting phrase. I want you, the listener, to think about that. Think about the last time you felt lonely or inadequate, and instead of reaching out for genuine connection, you just bought something.
Right.
A new outfit, a new skincare product, something to make yourself more appealing. It perfectly sets up the text's view on the ultimate modern manifestation of this whole system, which is industrial pornography. The source material argues that modern, mass-produced porn is the clearest proof of this massive consumer market built entirely on our sexual shame.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text introduces this really compelling concept called the political economy of shame.
I love this part.
It explains the mechanics of this beautifully. Natural erotic energy, which is essentially your baseline life force and creative energy, it doesn't just magically disappear when you block it with shame.
Right.
It gets displaced. It has to go somewhere.
I was trying to find the right metaphor for this. It's like if you dam a massive river, the water doesn't just cease to exist.
Exactly.
It's going to build up pressure and find another way down the mountain, usually flooding a valley somewhere else in the process.
Right. And where does that displaced energy go in our society? The text argues it is meticulously redirected into consumerism.
Yeah.
That desperate, unmet hunger for intimacy and aliveness gets channeled directly into the multi-billion-dollar beauty industry, into fast fashion, into the endless dopamine-driven scroll of social media where we constantly trade in the currency of desirability.
It's exhausting.
It is. The text states it plainly: the ashamed body is the profitable body. If you fundamentally believe your desires or your physical shape are wrong, you will spend your entire life and your entire paycheck trying to fix it.
And the market is right there with a giant neon sign saying, here, buy this, it'll finally fix you.
Always.
Which brings us directly to the author's critique of pornography. And I really appreciated this part of the book because the text doesn't take a puritanical, moralistic stance. It's not wagging a finger saying porn is a sin.
No, not at all.
Instead, it frames industrial porn as a cartographic problem, like a problem with the map.
A false geography.
Yes. Think about it like a GPS on your phone. Imagine you're trying to learn how to drive in a real, incredibly complex city. But your GPS only takes you through fake Hollywood movie sets.
Right, with the cardboard fronts.
Exactly. The buildings are just cardboard. There's no traffic, there are no potholes, there are no pedestrians acting unpredictably. That map systematically excludes all the realities of driving. The text argues that industrial porn does the exact same thing to intimacy. It provides a map that systematically excludes uncertainty, awkwardness, tender communication, and emotional aftermath.
It is a profound analogy, and the text warns that we are in totally uncharted territory here because we now have an entire generation receiving this industrial pornography as their primary and sometimes only form of sex education.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And through sheer overwhelming repetition, it teaches them a very specific lesson that sex is merely a visual event. It trains the brain to view it as a frictionless transaction where bodies are infinitely available and actual human connection is totally unnecessary.
Just two objects acting upon each other on a screen.
Yes, and the neurological impact of this is profound. The author cites research suggesting that this false map literally reshapes our neural architecture.
Wow.
It colonizes the erotic imagination of young people before that imagination even has a chance to discover itself organically.
That's so sad.
It establishes a neurological baseline expectation of a frictionless, perfectly lit visual transaction. And a real, breathing, messy, incredibly beautiful human encounter can simply never meet that artificial baseline.
So man, what does this all mean? We've gone on quite the journey here today.
We really have.
We started way back in ancient viewed as a cosmic world-renewing engine. Then we saw how that operating system was deliberately downgraded, turning our own bodies into jailers through systemic shame, all to make us more governable.
Right.
We looked at the targeted historical suppression of feminine erotic sovereignty and how that blocked, dammed-up energy was hijacked by commerce, trapping all of us in a cycle of endless consumerism guided by false digital maps. So where did the text leave us after all of that? Is there a way out, or are we just doomed to scroll forever?
There is a way out, and it's actually quite a beautiful, hopeful distillation.
Oh, good.
The text argues that if you strip away all of that artificially layered complexity, if you somehow manage to remove the religious shame, the commerce, the legislation, the historical trauma, and these false digital maps, what sex actually is at its core is incredibly simple.
Yeah.
It is a practice of presence.
Presence, just genuinely being there.
Just being fully in your body, with another person, in reality, without an agenda or a script. The text points out that it's one of the few experiences available to us in the modern world that genuinely dissolves our everyday self-protection. When you finally let go of the performance, when you stop trying to manage your self-image or look like the false map, you allow two nervous systems, two distinct fields of consciousness, to genuinely meet.
That's beautiful.
That is what the sacred actually is. It is unfiltered contact with reality. The author's ultimate point is that the problem was never sex itself. The problem was everything civilization layered over it to keep us separated from our own power.
It's returning to that original open source operating system.
Exactly.
The text closes with this incredibly powerful line, a person who knows it doesn't need what they're selling,
Such a great line.
which is just such a mic drop. But it also leaves us with a pretty wild thought to chew on as we wrap up today, something that goes even beyond the author's focus on consumerism.
Oh, where does your mind go with it?
Well, we just talked about pornography being a false map, right?
Yeah.
A two-dimensional screen.
Mhm.
But look at where technology is heading right now with artificial intelligence and virtual reality.
Right.
We are on the brink of having AI companions and fully immersive VR environments that are designed to perfectly cater to our every whim, offering zero friction and zero emotional risk.
Yeah, that's happening right now.
If we are already struggling with a hunger, with no real food, what happens to humanity when that false map becomes a completely immersive, three-dimensional simulation that perfectly mimics reality but requires absolutely no vulnerability?
Oh, wow.
Will we entirely lose the ability to endure the messy, beautiful reality of another human being? Or, and maybe this is the hopeful angle, will that total artificial extreme finally be the thing that pushes us to reject the simulation entirely and fight to reclaim our original authentic connection?
That is a staggering thought. It really reframes the stakes of everything we've been talking about.
It means learning how to truly connect isn't just about personal happiness anymore. It might literally be the only way to stay human in the future. We've got a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.